In these perilous times, see from current events how biblical prophecy is coming to pass in front of our eyes. You're watching In the Last Days, the program that looks at Israel and the end times with teaching from a Hebraic perspective. With Martin and Natalie Blackham, thank you to our friends and partners who make this program possible. Now, here's Martin and Natalie.
Shalom, dear friend. This is wonderful to be with you today. My name is Natalie Blackham. It's a pleasure to be with you and to bring you news and interviews from the land of Israel. This is In the Last Days TV program. My dear husband Martin today is behind the scenes, doing the camera work. And today we have a great friend. We've done a program last week with her. This is Katharine van de Beek. And it's wonderful to have her. She's speaking about music. She's a musician, professional musician. And we start to speak about the Bible and the music and the harp and restoration. She was living in Holland and in England. She came in Israel, a lot of adventures in the midst of all her life. And she's going to speak to us more today that she's doing a documentary that, again, there is progression in the restoration of music and the Bible. And now I present you again, Katharine. Katharine, thank you for coming, taking the time to come here.
Thank you.
Leave your little kids behind with your the grandma, and they can be looked after. Thank you for being here. Thank you for bringing your harp, which is so beautiful with the temple, is exactly what we are waiting to hear. Interesting enough, I know some people said to me, I want to hear, there is sound that I want to hear. And I think we are becoming hungry for this. There is a new sound that is coming, and people are waiting for that. So I think you are part of this big job of restoration. So tell us a bit what happened, where you've come from, and where you are going, and how you've been involved in the harp.
Well, I suppose it's a new and an ancient sound together. It's like the restoration of an ancient sound, but in the days that we're living, because it's the restoration of this instrument of David, the harp and the lyre, and the restoration of the music of the Bible, and I believe together with the restoration of spontaneous songs. So that's the new part, because in Corinthians it talks about how we're to sing songs, hymns and spiritual songs, psalms, hymns and spiritual songs to the Lord. And in my eyes, these are three completely separate things. They mean something different from each other. To me, the psalms are the scriptural songs. So when we're singing verses of scripture, even with the music that was originally written together with these words. And then the hymns are songs that people have composed that we're singing, whether they're composed 2 days ago, whether they're composed 3 weeks ago, whether they're composed 300 years ago or 500 years ago. To me, those are the hymns. And then the spiritual songs, I believe that those are the songs that we sing from our spirit to the Lord, that are spontaneously created, that we don't know in advance that we're going to sing them. And for much of the history of the body, we've had either one or two of these elements completely missing. And especially in the Dark Ages, we had 2 or even maybe 3 elements missing. So I believe that today he wants to hear all of these 3 kinds of songs, the spontaneous songs, the scriptural songs, and also the pre-written songs.
So when you speak about that, he reminds me also like Elijah and Elisha. They had a song of prophets, and they were always with the harps too. So there is also a connection there.
Yeah, the harp was very much taught in the school of the prophets, and the harp was connected with prophecy and scripture.
This is very interesting. So, but you've done, going back a bit backwards, you've done some music. You've done the Royal Academy of Music in London. You've been also in La Hague. So you had a very academic way of learning music and studying it and performing. Katharine has been also around Israel and Japan and Europe doing a lot of performance. So what is the link?
Well, the academic side of all my music studies, I actually did 7 years of music college training, and what was very unusual about my training is that from age 16, before I even entered music college, I specialized in historical performance, and mostly that's something that people will do after they've done at least 1 degree. So I specialized kind of 10 years before most people normally would have. Which did mean that I had a slightly academic approach. I would read lots of treatises from the time of the music that I was playing, and we learnt to play music from the medieval period all the way until the Romantic period, in as close a way as possible to how the composers conceived their compositions. And this wasn't with the motivation of being academic or being correct, but it was rather to bring the music to life as best we could in as stronger way as possible, because if we don't understand what the composer's original intention was when he composed it, how can we communicate that same interpretation to the audience? And communication for me was always the most important element when I was performing. What am I actually giving to the people listening, and what are they understanding and receiving from that? So I wanted, when I played, for it to be very lively and for it to be very clear what emotion the music was portraying to the listener, whether it was something very sad or very happy or very melancholy, or all manner of different things you can communicate with music.
So, but you also discover that when you do music, it's not just an intellectual thing, because sometimes it's like maybe in the Royal Academy, is like there is certainly intellectual work who needs to be done, but you discover that it was more than that. Can you explain a bit about that?
Mm-hmm. Well, music affects us on many levels. It can speak to our mind, and it can speak to our soul, and it can speak to our spirit, and it can affect us in all of these different ways. And I think what's also important is that music can either be from our own soul, or it can be from divine inspiration, or it can be from the opposite. So we have to be very careful with music, actually. How are we using it? And are we using it for something good, or are we using it for something evil, or are we using it for something that's just human from our soul level? And I also did a lot of research. I was sort of in 3 different areas of research all at the same time, and because of that it was very hard to put it into any one kind of a degree, because it was dealing with music, but it was also dealing with science, and it was also dealing with theology in a way. So it never really fitted into one. And I suppose if you're talking about the music of the distant past, then you're talking about ethnomusicology at the same time. So it never really fitted into one box. But what I was discovering a lot is that sound affects the body on a physical level, which means that we can either bring healing to someone with the music that we're playing, or we can even bring death. For example, there was an experiment done where somebody blew an enormous police whistle. I believe it was about 6 meters long. And because the pitch was so low and it was so strong, it actually mashed all of the internal organs of the person blowing it. And so they died. So if sound is too loud or too high or too low, I mean, you also think about the weapons that are being created today. Some of them are sonic. In other words, with sound, and they can produce paralysis, they can make us feel dizzy or nauseous. They can be used to stop an army in their tracks, because you hear this vibration, or maybe it's even so high that we don't actually hear it, but our body experiences it. So I think we have to be very, very careful about how we use music. And if you think of something like a drum or an electric guitar, when you put those 2 instruments together and you play them very loud and at certain frequencies, and if you do it in a rhythm which is continuous, it can actually get in sync with our heart, and it can change the beating of our heart. So somebody, by playing those instruments, can speed up our heart or slow our heart down. So we need to use these things with caution. And of course we can damage someone's hearing if it's too loud.
I heard also that the harp, some people are using it in America, that when people have surgery, they use the harp and the healing is much quicker, they recover very. Have you heard also about that?
Well, they're also doing it in Israel. There's an organization which is all about using the harp as a therapeutic instrument. And one of my teachers, Jill Rogoff, is involved with this. And they go into different hospitals in Israel and they play for the patients. And the recovery rate is actually increased by 25%. So music can also be used for healing. And of course, the wonderful biblical example of that is the story of David and Saul in 1 Samuel 16, where Saul is oppressed by an evil spirit, actually because of his own rebellion. And David, in his mercy, goes and plays the harp over him. And he's delivered from the evil spirit and he recovers. But then he goes back to his madness again when David leaves. It's only a temporary relief because actually he needs to repent.
Which is interesting. And also David, I think it's not all said too much, but David was playing the harp when he was young. And when you do some research about how David was in his family, he was the rejected one. He was the one who was keeping the sheep, you know, not 100% a son for the family. And I'm sure that God has done a lot of work in him and healing with the harp, which is interesting. And he prepared him for kingship, to be a king. So this is very interesting. Now speak also, like, we live in Israel, we live in a certain place in Harada. The Ark of the Covenant came a certain way to go to the temple. Can you explain a bit that? Because it's like we live in Israel, which is an amazing place.
It's an incredible village where we live, actually. So the Ark was positioned initially in a place called Shiloh, which is in biblical Judea and Samaria, which the world currently calls the West Bank. And from Shiloh, it traveled south, and it came through our area. It rested in Kiryat Anavim before it went back to the city.
Kiryat Anavim?
Kiryat Yearim.
Oh, okay.
Kiryat Yearim, thank you. Before it went back to the city of David and then found its resting place. But it's said that our village was actually a Levitical village, so Levitical families actually lived here, and they travelled from here to Jerusalem to perform their duties in the temple. And it's even possible that the house of Obed-Edom was in Harada, so there is a possibility that the Ark even rested literally in our village for a number of years.
This is amazing. Now, when you say that, when you were speaking last week, and I was thinking about it, you said that you were playing music, that your family was coming from Lithuania. And so do you have some Levitical, I don't know how to say, Levitical blood
lineage in our blood? Not as far as I know. I don't think there were any Cohens in our family.
It was just like, you know, wondering, because God put people, sometimes we don't know what we're doing, and suddenly give more understanding of what's happening in our life. This is just interesting. Now, one of the things that you were telling me, also during your college, when you study music, you go to the 12th centuries and suddenly big gap before.
Yeah, this is very interesting because we study the music of the past and we go back approximately to the 1200s, to the medieval period, and we study music from then and then how it grew through the Renaissance and the Baroque and the early classical, late classical and the Romantic and so on, right up until the modern day. But we don't really learn anything about the period before that. Whereas in Israel, there are, of course, many people that specialize in the temple period. So they know a lot about how the music could have been in the Bible and what the scriptures say about this and so on. And then, of course, you have another branch of music study, which is called ethnomusicology, which is studying music of different tribes and so on, different ethnic groups and how their music is. But there are very few people who have dared to put any of this research together. And I know that, in fact, in Israel, people that have tried to do this have been really shot down, which is very interesting because I discover so many parallels between the music of the Baroque and the music of the biblical times. And if you think about it in a way, it's very logical because you had this incredible institution, the temple, and then you have the dispersion of the Jewish people in AD 70 after the invasion of the Romans. And what happened then to all of those instruments, to all of those musicians, to all of this knowledge? Of course, they were dispersed over the whole earth eventually, taking with them the knowledge that they had about music, taking with them the harp and the instruments. And you find the Celtic harp, of course, in Scotland and Ireland and all of these countries. I believe that this came with the people as they traveled, the early Jews, the early Christians, as they traveled across the earth. They took these things with them. So you find the harp in almost every culture. And if you look at how many countries have the harp as their national instrument, it's really a lot of countries, even as far as Japan and some Latin American countries. It's the national instrument of Wales.
Even
it's
the
very
guitar,
important in
even
Ireland.
the guitar in one way could have been the guitar. Do you think it could have been also coming from the harp and change?
Well,
or
my theory is this.
Uh-huh.
It's really my theory, but I would need to go back and prove it.
Theory from Katharine van de Beek,
Yes.
you know.
I mean, in the biblical times, you had these two instruments that are strongly related. You have the harp and you have the lyre, the nevel and the kinnor. When I first moved here, so this would be more like a kinnor, except that it's missing some kind of bridge.
Okay.
What really struck me very strongly after I moved here is that in modern Hebrew, kinnor is used to denote violin, whereas in the Bible it was used to denote the lyre. And I wondered, how can this be? How did this word change so much in meaning? So I started to think about it and to research. And what I think is that most of the families of stringed instruments develop from the lyre, because most stringed instruments have some kind of bridge. The guitar has a bridge, violin, cello, all of that family has a bridge. The viol, the viola da gamba, and all of that family also has a bridge, and it has many strings. I believe that they all developed from a lyre-like instrument. And I believe that the harp in the main stayed as the harp, except for what my friend Bridget was teaching in the concert that we did the other day, which is that the harpsichord is basically a harp on its side, and that there were these other early keyboard instruments that took the name of the harp and put it inside the name of the instrument. So I think possibly the harpsichord and these other related instruments developed from the harp, and the rest of the string family developed from the lyre.
Very interesting.
And you can still find both instruments being used today. For example, in Ethiopia, they claim that they have 6 sizes of harp originating from temple times. Not the actual instruments, but just the concept of it. And in fact, the lady that I mentioned before, Katharine Finch, who was the harpist to Prince Charles in England, she did a big research about the history of the harp, and she went to Ethiopia. And she met there a man who actually plays a huge lyre-like instrument. It's probably about this big, and it has these very thick, unsubtle, unsophisticated gut strings. And at the bottom of each string it has what looks like a piece of paper, which as you play it creates this buzzing sound. So it sounds very rough. It doesn't sound anything like these pretty harps that we have today. So it made me wonder, is this more the sound that could have been in the temple? And there's other harps like this that were used also in Europe in the medieval period. They had also these harps, they're called bray harps, and they also have this buzzing sound together with the strings. So it's not really a pretty sound. It's like the sound you would imagine, I don't know, a farmer would use or something like this, or like David in the fields, but not a modern, sophisticated kind of a thing.
Very interesting.
Yeah, and also they even discovered, I think it was in Persia, they discovered 3,000-year-old lyres.
Again, Persia is like, yeah, where the Jews have been dispersed right at the beginning.
But these were definitely not instruments from the temple, because they had carvings of cow, like as the head of the instrument. So it was clearly some kind of pagan lyre, but it shows that they were very big and they were very elaborate. They were made from silver. Can you imagine someone making something from silver and carving in it? And it's 3,000 years old, and it's there for us to see. I think you can look it up on the internet. There's a couple of lyres that they found.
Where did they find them?
These were found in Persia.
In Persia?
Yeah.
Like in caves or in...
I think they were buried underneath layers of silt.
Oh my gosh, this is amazing. Very interesting. Now speak a bit, because we want to, for the people to be able to hear the sound, tell us a bit about the Hebrew language, and like about the blessing and what is coming now, like the new sound. There is something happening, if you can.
So, well, what I've been researching a lot is the music that is actually written into the Bible, and this lady called Susanna Haik van Tora, who dedicated her life to to researching about this. So I'm really enjoying taking different portions of scripture and finding the music that went together with that, and playing it and singing it and doing this together with other people. Last night I think we played with almost 24 harps on the Mount of Olives. We did the Shema and the Aaronic blessing and sang them together. It was very special. So I think the new sound is a connection between the new and the old. I think it's going back to something simple but very profound, something which is placing more importance on the text and less importance on the instruments. Because I think what you find many times today in modern worship bands or teams or whatever you would like to call them, and by no means all of them, but many times what you do find is that the lower instruments are amplified so loud, the bass and the drums, that it completely dominates. And so you're almost unable to hear the text that the people are singing. But I think we're going back to the opposite, where the text becomes of primary importance and where the instruments are just accompanying. So whether we're taking something ancient or whether we're taking something spontaneous or new, I think it's kind of a new paradigm that is being attached to the songs that are being written and how they're being played or performed.
Very interesting. So we want to show you now, because you've done an amazing performance in Tel Aviv, so we want to show you, Katharine was performing in front of us, so you can listen to it, and we want to bless you. You know, blessing is coming from Zion. There is a restoration. Thank you, Katharine, for all the things that you are bringing us, and we're on the way, isn't it? It's like every day there is new things who are found, and we want to bless you. Listen to it, and this is from Zion. So I hope that you appreciate this music, this new sound of music. Katharine, thank you for all the things that you are doing, the research and teaching people to play harp, playing the harp on the Mount of Olives. This is quite a cool thing, really. We know that in Zechariah 14, we know that Messiah is coming back on the Mount of Olives, and I can imagine that for him to come with this music, what a welcome. This is just amazing. And Katharine also has started a Facebook. It's called David and So, the Power and Purpose of Music. So you can go on her Facebook. You can see also her email that we are giving you. You can write to her if you have some inspiration, if you might have some questions to ask her. And we will carry on doing some programs. Thank you for helping us. You know that we are doing this program also with your help and your support. So please carry on your help. Thank you for your support. And now from Katharine and from me, from Zion here, we are blessing you. And don't forget, we are living in the last days.
You've been watching In the Last Days, a TV program with Martin and Natalie Blackham, the program that looks at Israel and the end times with teaching from a Hebraic perspective. If you would like to financially support the program or find out about conferences, meetings, or ministry products, then please contact us with the details on your screen. Visit our easy-to-use website at www.inthelastdays.com and register for our free e-newsletter. Get the latest news from Israel, product information, online video teaching, or watch today's TV program at a time that's convenient to you. Thank you again, friends and partners, for making this program possible.
See you same time, same station for the next program from In the Last Days.